All right, Candace Owens has been banned from the country of Australia. Is this going to backfire? Probably would be my guess. Let's go over exactly what happened. So Candace Owens is set to speak. She was set to speak in Australia, 5 live speaking events starting next month. November 17th, I believe, was the first one. Pretty pricey events that she was going to be speaking at. The prices for the tickets range from $95 all the way to over $1,000, I think $1,500 in order to have dinner, sit in a room and have dinner with Candace Owens. So pretty pricey tickets, going to be doing 5 of these. But apparently the immigration minister decided that he didn't want her kind in Australia. Now, what is her kind? Her kind, they claim, are divisive people who spread discord in the nation. This is the exact quote. This is from Immigration Minister Tony Burke. He says, quote, from downplaying the impact of the Holocaust with comments about Joseph Mengele through to claims that Muslims started slavery, Candace Owens has the capacity to incite discord in almost every direction. He said Australia's national interest is best served when Candace Owens is somewhere else. Okay. And then he also went on to say tickets to these events are selling for $100. I hope she has good refunds policy. He said there hasn't been an application. So this was back in August. That's what he said most recently, the one that I just read to you. He also said back in August, there hasn't been an application for a visa, but if there is, the brief will come to me personally. So he told his people in Australia that when Candace Owens applies for that visa that she needs to enter the country, send it to my desk. So he says, my opposite, and then when he gets to his desk, what is he going to do? Veto. We're not going to allow her in. No, denied. So he says, my opposition to anti-Semitism and Islamophobia has always been on the record. I have clear legal powers to knock back a visa to anyone who would incite discord. Wow, that is a lot of power for one person to have in a country, to be able to say who can come and go into your nation. That is based on just their personal decisions. Like they could just decide they don't like you, and so they decide to ban you from that country. The Executive Council of Australian Jewry co-chief executive Peter Wertheim argued Owen failed the character test under the Migration Act. I don't think she was trying to migrate to Australia, but apparently she failed this character test. They only want certain people with certain character in their country. And he says, quote, at a time of unprecedented strains on the cohesiveness of Australian society, which is very largely the outcome of ignorant and malicious comments on social media, the last thing we need to be importing into our country is yet another so-called celebrity who has made racist and bigoted comments about Jews and other vulnerable groups, he said. So there you have it. Australia has no freedom of speech. Australia, they don't have the right to bear arms either. They banned a bunch of guns back in the 90s. They also expanded, actually they began hate speech laws in the 90s around the same time that they banned semi-automatic weapons or did the buyback program that they did. And they have since expanded their hate speech laws. So a lot of people cannot get into Australia. Candace Owens is on a very long list of people who cannot get into the country. David Icke can't get in, Gavin McInnes, Kent Heckenlively. These are, Heckenlively was because of COVID. Gavin McInnes, they said it was because he was part of Proud Boys, so he was denied entry on character grounds. David Icke was banned for they call him a conspiracy theorist. This is from them, okay? The conspiracy theorist known for his reptilian shapeshifter theories. Heckenlively was the self-proclaimed world's #1 anti-vaxxer. He was refused entry in 2017. There have been, people from Floyd Mayweather and Chris Brown have been banned because of domestic violence charges. So they've had a lot of different bans on people that Australia has just decided. Let's see, there's Novak Djokovic was one of the big ones during COVID. He was banned from coming in because he refused to get vaccinated. And even though he went into the country isolated, tested positive, he was absolutely no threat to anybody. They still said, he was in the country and they actually deported him and said he wasn't going to be allowed to come back in and play. And he had been the winningest tennis player of the Australian Open in history, the #1 tennis player. And they said he was the unhealthy one. He was going to spread the COVID vaccine, COVID to everybody, and they wouldn't let him in. So Australia has proven itself to be quite the dystopian place. What's interesting about this, though, is the people who got Candace Owens, the people who advocated for Candace Owens to be banned, were a bunch of Jewish organizations inside of Australia. So you've got, do they not see how this is only going to backfire? Do they not see how the fight against anti-Semitism, this quote unquote fight against anti-Semitism, is only going to lead to anti-Semitism when you do things like advocate to ban a speaker from coming into your country to give 5 speaking engagements and leave? Somebody who is not actually calling to violence. She's not advocating for the death of anybody. In fact, she's advocating against the death of people. She's advocating against the death of Palestinians. She doesn't like it. She doesn't like to see kids blown up. She's been advocating against that. She's questioning what we consider historical fact, right? What is written in the history books. She's questioning those facts. Which you're not allowed to do in Australia, apparently. They don't have free speech. And so you've got a plethora of Jewish organizations inside of Australia. It was about 4 or 5 different organizations, plus a transgender organization, an LGBTQI plus, or is it SILGBTQI plus these days? Anyway, that organization also in Australia, one of those organizations also advocated against Candace Owens getting a visa because they didn't like her rhetoric on trans and kids being affirmed and transitioned and put on, sterilizing medications and whatnot. They don't agree with her. And because they don't agree with her, they've decided to block her entry into the country. These types of moves, okay, all you have to do is just kind of look at recent history with the same sort of thing that's happened to Candace Owens. Who else really recently notoriously banned Candace Owens from speaking and from sharing her ideas publicly on a platform? Oh, Ben Shapiro, the Daily Wire. How did that pan out? Did that lead to less anti-Semitism, do you think? Do you think that people thought, wow, Candace Owens was really wrong in all the things she said? Wow, she was really spreading conspiracy theories. Well, now that she's banned, good thing, because now we don't have to listen to all that conspiracy theory stuff. And Ben said it was all wrong, so it must have been wrong. Or did we see maybe the opposite reaction to that, where Candace Owens shot up more so in the public eye, more so people listened to what she had to say, more people then said, wait a minute, if they're trying to ban her, if they're trying to silence her, if they're trying to censor her, that's usually a sign that they don't like what she has to say because maybe it's getting too close to the truth, or maybe it's making people question things, and we don't want them doing that. We wouldn't want them doing that. So all it did when Candace Owens was fired from the Daily Wire was shoot her up more into the spotlight, bring her more notoriety, and make people fight back harder. People who were more quiet and silent about the Israel-Palestine issue, for example, suddenly became much more outspoken. So if you're Jewish, and you're really, truly, you're one of these Jewish organizations in Australia, what made you think it was a good idea to go down this path to, rather than just ignore her, let her into the country, let her do her speaking engagements that, by the way, none of us knew about? None of us knew about these engagements until you brought it up, and then you banned her, and now we all know about it. And now we're thinking, wow, she's sitting there saying things like Jews are in charge, or Jews are controlling the world. I don't know exactly what she's been saying. Well, let's just say that's the type of stuff she's been saying, because certainly a lot of people on social media are saying this. They're saying, well, this really proves the theory that, Jews have no power whatsoever. That showed us, these Jewish organizations went out there, got her banned from entering an entire nation. But now nothing to see here, guys. There's absolutely no power or control whatsoever by these organizations or by this group, this tribe of people, right? That's not how human psyche works. If you're able to get a person banned from entering a country, people are going to think you've got a lot of power, because it kind of takes a lot of power to do something like that. I've never been able to ban somebody from entering a country. So if you're able to do that, then you must have a lot of sway. And I don't think it's like, oh, Jews control the world and that's where the sway is. I mean, look, there were trans groups that did the same thing. And we've been able to see this, with this kind of the swarm, when the swarm believes in a certain idea. right? The swarm believed in the COVID narrative. And so the swarm was able to get Novak Djokovic, the greatest tennis player of all time, banned from entering Australia to play at the Australian Open. They were able to get that done. You've got these trans activists that are able to get it to where you're banned if you're unwilling to, or if you dead name a person, for example, or if you're unwilling to say that a man who presents himself as a woman is truly, genuinely a woman and should earn all these women's awards and play sports against women. You get banned and censored for this. There is a mindset and an ideology that the swarm buys into. And when the swarm buys into it and they swarm around and they've got some power and influence and people are worried about what kind of retaliation they'll have, they get banned. The irony about this, and this is something I really want to point out, the irony of this in particular is that we're seeing a lot of these pro-Palestine protests and a lot of people who are, they've been anti-woke. They don't like anything that the woke mob puts out there. And they look at these pro-Palestinian protesters on these college campuses and they say, these are the same protesters who protested for trans rights, for men who present as women to use the women's bathroom, or for men who present as women to play against women in women's sports. These are the same exact group of people. These are the same people who went out there saying, defund the police. We don't want jails anymore. We don't care if this person's committing a heinous crime. Don't go after them because of the color of their skin or something along those lines, right? So people look at that and then they say, so therefore, because they've been wrong and completely unhinged with all of these other ideas, they must also be wrong when it comes to this Palestine issue, this pro-Palestine. Oh, these guys, they're the woke mob. But the irony of this is that particular woke mob in this particular point has absolutely no power. When was the last time you saw someone banned from entering Australia because they were pro-Israel? I mean, you don't see that. You're not seeing the woke Palestinian mob coming after the pro-Israel people and getting them canceled or fired or completely ripped off the internet. Netflix ripping off, 35 some odd shows or documentaries from their platform about Palestine. You're not seeing that happen with Israel or Jews, right? But you are seeing that when it comes to Islam or Palestinians. So where's the swarm and which one's the woke mob in this particular case? And we have to kind of stop and ask ourselves that. But this is only going to backfire. The big point is with Candace Owens is that now we all know about this. We didn't know about this before. We didn't know she was going to go speak in Australia. Now we know. Now it's absolutely egregious that she's been banned from Australia. Australia, which is a penal colony, always as much as we like to think of Australia as this freedom. They're all a little rugged. You got Crocodile Dundee. You got the Outback. They're like wrestling Joey kangaroos, right? You got these images of these Australians and how rugged and how they just kind of give the middle finger to the man. And it's just, unfortunately, Australia has never been that since the time that it was a penal colony. It's had harsher rules, harsher laws. It's been more restrictive because it was a penal colony and they were dealing with criminals. And who has the fewest rights in the world? People locked up in prison. And Australia was basically one giant island prison. And then when Australia gained its freedom and became a normal country, it still held on to the ethos of being highly controlled, highly dystopian, very few rights for the people. And we've seen this time and time again, from them taking their guns away, from them giving them hate speech laws, from them banning people from entering their country because they don't want the COVID vaccine or they spread discord with the population. Here in the United States, people do get banned from entering the United States, but it has to be on one very specific ground. You can be banned. Now, they loosely use it. So they use it, and they abuse it for sure. But there is one way to get banned from entering the United States, and that is if you have in some connection, you have to have some sort of connection to terrorism. So whether you aided and abetted terrorists, you've given material support to terrorists, or you are a terrorist, that could get you banned from entering the United States. And there have been several people who have been prevented. George Galloway, our friend George Galloway, who's been here on the show, was one of the people who was once banned from entering the United States because they said he had aided terrorists. He had given material support or aided terrorists in some way. That was then lifted. So he is allowed to enter the country, last I checked, but that was still something that was used against him. So the United States does have these sort of border security laws that prevent certain people from entering the country, but not on ideas like Australia, where you could be banned. Milo Yiannopoulos, for example, cannot enter Australia. Now Candace Owens cannot enter Australia, all for thought crimes. It is not a free country. It's never been the great outback with uh, people shoving it, giving it to the man type of a thing. It's never been that. It still isn't. And at the end of the day, all this has done is this banning of Candace Owens has created, I think, more suspicion, more anti-Semitism. It has completely backfired. This is not the path forward. Censorship and bans typically do not work out in the favor of those who think that implementing them is the right way to go. This has just created more anti-Semitism than it is solved. That is for sure. And yep, I hope she wasn't setting her heart too much on visiting Australia, because looks like not only her, but many people, I'm sure, will be added to the list and unable to attend the Great Down Under. Thank you so much for watching. This was just a clip from the longer, larger show that you can catch Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, at KimIversonShow.com. That'll route you to the platform where you need to be in order to get the full uncensored show every Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Click on that link, watch the full interview. See you there.